Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, appropriately enough, joining me now is one of Brexit's strongest advocates, the Conservative MP, John Redwood. A very good morning to you, Mr Redwood.
Morning.
What did you make of this week's protest on the Thames? Nigel Farage flinging haddock into the river. I mean, spectacle aside, potential fly-tipping prosecution aside, I mean, fishermen are right to be angry, aren't they?
Yes, I think fishermen feel very let down, and I hope the government will think again about this. I would like the government to push harder on the negotiations. They are at last going to be allowed to negotiate over the things that Britain wants to negotiate over, a positive future partnership and a free trade agreement. I don't see why we should have to give our fish away for another 21 months in order to secure imports from Germany, because I think Germany wants to carry on exporting to us anyway. So I would urge the government to revisit that. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. We want to take back control of our fish from the spring of next year and have a fishing policy that is good for British fish and for British fishermen.
I mean, as regards fishing and as regards, in fact, a number of other areas, there does appear to be growing recognition inside the Commons and elsewhere that actually in March next year we don't leave the EU except in name.
Yes, well, and that's why some of us are saying let's push a bit harder on these negotiations. The UK has been very accommodating and very generous, and I fully support the Prime Minister in her wish to have good relations with our former partners in the EU. But we mustn't end up with a bad deal. She's always been very clear that no deal is better than a bad deal. And just remember what no deal gives us. It means we get our money to spend from March 2019 onwards, all of it. It means we can make our own laws, we can conduct our own trade negotiations with the rest of the world, we can control our own fishing and have a better fishing policy, we can have our own farming policy. There's lots and lots of upside from just leaving. Now, I wish her every success in negotiating something better than that, but deal has to be better than no deal.
Is there enough capacity, though, within the civil service to actually do the work that would be needed March next year to kind of move on to those that no-deal platform?
Well, yes, we're assured they have got that under control. Indeed, many of us have been pressing for them to do that, not because we don't want a deal, we'd love a deal to be better than no deal, but because the only way we think you're going to get a decent deal is to show the rest of the European Union that we are quite prepared to leave with no deal. If you're not prepared to do that, you will take dictation from them on the terms of departure. If you can leave with no deal, then obviously you can have a proper negotiation. And we've been assured by the civil service and by ministers, who are now spending a lot of our money on it, that everything will be fine if we leave with no deal, although they, of course, would much rather have a deal to deal with all sorts of individual issues.
Just on the 21-month kind of implementation period, transition period, whatever we want to call it, I mean, do you think that there is generally an acceptance that one is required? I mean, there are dissenting voices in business, there are dissenting voices in the Commons, but they are in the minority, aren't they?
I'm not sure they're in the minority in the country. I mean, I speak to a lot of businesses when I get out and about in the United Kingdom, and over the last year, the overwhelming voice of smaller and medium-sized enterprises has been just get on with it, we can live with more or less everything. By all means, if you can get a free trade deal, that's great, but we want to know the answer. We don't want this to go on and on forever. I don't think there is a lot of support for 21 months of no change when you still don't know what you're changing to. And I don't think you can agree an implementation period or periods unless and until you know what you're implementing. And if there is nothing worth implementing, then why don't we just leave in March 2019? Because we're told by the government they could do that.
I mean, it is often said that there is not the opportunity given for making the positive case for properly leaving the European Union in March next year. So make it.
Well, the first thing I want to do is take back control of the money. I think we desperately need some more money in our health service and in our schools and social care. And the easiest way to pay for that, without borrowing too much, is to take that 12 billion a year back that we give to the rest of the EU and spend it on our priorities. I also want to get control of our taxes again. I mean, a lot of us would like to get VAT off domestic fuel, off female hygiene products, off green products. We're not allowed to take it off at the moment under EU rules. Let's get on with it. And again, we'd have the money to do that if we had got our 12 billion back. We're very keen to have a fishing policy which stops all these discards. We want fewer fish to be taken out of the sea, but more fish sold and put on our table. We want a farming policy which means fewer food miles and more food grown and produced in the United Kingdom. There are so many upsides from leaving. Because if you go back over the last 45 years of our membership of the Single Market and Customs Union, it didn't produce any boost to growth, and it did quite a lot of damage to some very important strategic industries.
Still, there is clearly quite a lot of focus, particularly today, given the front page of The Observer and a number of stories, about the legitimacy of the win by the Leave campaign. I mean, if the spending rules were subverted by Vote Leave and Be Leave, doesn't that at the very least cast a shadow over the vote's legitimacy?
Well, this, as I understand it, has twice been investigated, and twice it's been found that there was no infringement of the rules by Vote Leave. If it's got to be investigated again, well then, so be it. But I think most people out there feel we had a perfectly fair referendum. And we, on my side of the argument, didn't go on complaining about the way government money and the weight of the government was used on the pro-Remain side, all those false forecasts from the Treasury, which we know are false now because they were forecasts about the immediate year after the vote, forecasting a recession which didn't occur. That was just one of those things in the debate.
I mean, I understand that politicians never like to answer hypotheticals, but if these links are proved, because there is fresh evidence today about the level of direction between the Be Leave and the Vote Leave campaign, if this investigation does show an improper link between the two, I mean, no one's talking about rerunning the referendum result, but people will be questioning it for time to come.
Well, it seems that people are going to question it all the time because there are a lot of people who don't like democracy in our country, clearly. We don't have these sort of issues every time there's a general election, although all sorts of things go on in general elections which you might be able to query. But I hear from the Vote Leave side, and I wasn't an official custodian of the Vote Leave campaign, I hear that they kept the paperwork in order and played by the rules. They deny all these allegations. If they got to be tested again by a regulator or in a court, so be it. But they have been tested twice, and Vote Leave has been found to behave themselves.
Just very briefly, as a man of very strongly held principle yourself, I mean, what do you make of the sacking of Owen Smith for expressing views shared by a majority of the Labour Party?
Well, I think he had to be sacked, because if you belong to a shadow cabinet or a cabinet, you have to stick to the collective view, and the collective view of Labour, as I understand it, is no second referendum and not staying in the customs union or the single market. And I agree with those propositions of Labour. I don't agree with a lot of the other things they say. But if that's the party line, that's what you have to stick to. If you wish to be independent of the party line, you have to be on the backbenches. So Mr Smith can now do what he likes.
Indeed. Mr Redwood, many thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
I've been getting